Imagine a world without democracy. A world without philosophy, without theater, without the Olympics. A world without the very ideas of freedom, citizenship, and reason. That world would exist, if not for Greece. Greece is often called the cradle of Western civilization, and for good reason. From its rocky shores and scattered islands emerged not just kings and warriors, but poets, thinkers, and visionaries whose ideas still guide us today. When we vote, when we study science, when we admire art or drama, we are walking in the footsteps of Greece. But the history of Greece is not just about shining temples and wise philosophers. It is also a story of fierce battles, of cities that rose and fell, of empires that conquered and collapsed. It is the story of ordinary farmers who became soldiers, of explorers who carried their culture across the world, and of a people who, no matter how many times they were invaded or ruled, always found a way to rise again. From the mysterious Minoans of Crete to the heroic warriors of Troy. From the birth of democracy in Athens to the unstoppable armies of Alexander the Great. From centuries under Roman and Ottoman rule to the modern nation we know today, the history of Greece spans thousands of years, filled with legends, struggles, and triumphs. This is not just the story of one country. This is the story of a civilization that changed the course of human history. This is the entire history of Greece. The birth of Greek civilization, Minoans and Mycenaeans. Long before the shining temples of Athens or the legions of Alexander, Greek civilization began on the islands of the Aegean Sea. The first great culture to emerge was the Minoans, centered on the island of Crete around 2000 BC. The Minoans were not warriors like later Greeks. They were traders, artists, and sailors. Their ships carried goods across the Mediterranean, linking Greece with Egypt and Mesopotamia. At the heart of their culture stood the magnificent palace of Knossos, a maze-like complex of courtyards, storerooms, and frescoes. To later Greeks, this palace became the inspiration for the myth of King Minos and the Labyrinth, where the half-man, half-bull creature, the Minotaur, lurked in darkness. But the Minoans' peaceful power could not last forever. Around 1450 BC, their civilization declined, possibly due to natural disasters like the volcanic eruption of Thera, Santorini, combined with invasions from mainland warriors. Rising in their place were the Mycenaeans, the first true Greek-speaking civilization. Unlike the Minoans, the Mycenaeans were fierce warriors and kings, ruling from fortified palaces like Mycenae, Tiryns, and Pylos. Their society was built on conquest and heroism, and their legends live on in epic tales like the Trojan War. Kings like Agamemnon and heroes like Achilles may be part history, part myth, but they reflect the martial spirit of the Mycenaeans. The Mycenaeans dominated the Greek world until about 1100 BC, when their civilization mysteriously collapsed. Palaces were abandoned, trade networks vanished, and writing was lost. Greece fell into what historians call the Dark Ages, a time when much of the old knowledge disappeared. Yet even in this darkness, the seeds of Greek identity survived. Myths, stories, and oral traditions kept alive the memory of gods, heroes, and wars, stories that would later inspire works like Homer's Iliad and Odyssey. The stage was set, out of collapse and silence, a new Greek world would one day rise again. The Greek Dark Ages and Rebirth. When the Mycenaean palaces collapsed around 1100 BC, Greece entered a period that historians call the Dark Ages. For nearly 4 centuries, much of what had been achieved was lost. Writing disappeared, trade routes broke down, and grand cities fell silent. Villages became small and isolated, and survival replaced ambition as the daily struggle. But even in this darkness, Greek culture did not die. Traditions and stories were passed down through generations, not in books or scrolls, but in the spoken word. Bards and storytellers kept alive the memory of great heroes and gods. Around campfires and village gatherings, tales of the Trojan War, of mighty Achilles and clever Odysseus, were told again and again. These oral traditions became the foundation for works like Homer's Iliad and Odyssey, epic poems that would shape Greek identity for centuries. Slowly, around 800 BC, Greece began to awaken. The art of writing returned, this time using an alphabet borrowed from the Phoenicians. Communities grew larger, and a new form of social and political life emerged, the polis, or city-state. Each polis was a small, independent world of its own, with its own laws, leaders, and traditions. Some would grow into places of great power, like Athens and Sparta. It was also during this time that the Greeks began to look outward again. Trade revived, ships once more crossed the Aegean, and contact with Egypt and the Near East brought new ideas in art, architecture, and science. Religion and mythology also took deeper root, as Greeks began to shape their pantheon of gods into a structured system of belief. From the ashes of collapse, Greece had entered a new age, one that would lay the foundations for philosophy, democracy, and empire. The Dark Ages were ending, and the classical Greek world was about to be born. The rise of the city-states, Athens and Sparta. As Greece emerged from its Dark Ages, a new way of life took shape, the polis, or city-state. Unlike the vast empires of Egypt or Persia, Greece was never a single unified kingdom in these early centuries. Instead, it was a patchwork of hundreds of independent city-states, each with its own government, traditions, and identity. Two of these polis would become the most famous, and the most powerful, Athens and Sparta. Athens grew on the rocky peninsula of Attica. Surrounded by the sea, it became a center of trade and culture. Athens valued knowledge, debate, and creativity. Here, politics were not left to kings. Instead, citizens came together to discuss and vote. Over time, this system developed into democracy, the idea that government should be shaped by the people. Though far from perfect, only free men could vote, not women or slaves. It was a revolutionary idea that would echo through history. Athens also became home to artists, philosophers, and dramatists, who laid the foundations of Western thought and art. Sparta, however, was the opposite. Located inland on the fertile plain of Laconia, Sparta built its society on military discipline. From the age of 7, Spartan boys were taken from their families and trained to be warriors in the harsh Agoj system. Strength, obedience, and endurance were prized above all else. Women, though not soldiers, were expected to be strong and to raise warriors. Sparta had kings, but real power was held by a council of elders and military leaders who ensured the city remained focused on one goal: to produce the finest soldiers in Greece. While Athens celebrated debate and culture, Sparta demanded silence, discipline, and loyalty. One was a city of philosophers and citizens, the other a camp of warriors and kings. Yet both were deeply Greek, and both were admired and feared by their neighbors. This rivalry between Athens and Sparta would shape the destiny of Greece itself. For in their differences lay both the strength and the weakness of the Greek world, independent, creative, and free, but also divided, competitive, and often at war with itself. The stage was set for both great achievements and great conflicts that would define the Greek story. Greek religion and mythology. At the heart of Greek life was religion and mythology. Unlike religions that had a single holy book or prophet, the Greeks built their beliefs around a vast collection of gods, heroes, and myths that explained the mysteries of the world. The Greeks believed their gods lived high above them on Mount Olympus, the tallest mountain in Greece. There, Zeus ruled as king of the gods, wielding thunderbolts as weapons. Beside him sat Hera, his queen, goddess of marriage and family. Their children and siblings filled the skies, seas, and underworld: Poseidon, lord of the sea; Hades, ruler of the underworld; Athena, goddess of wisdom and war; Apollo, god of the sun, music, and prophecy; Artemis, goddess of the hunt, and many more. These gods were not distant or perfect. They were powerful, but they were also deeply human, jealous, proud, loving, and vengeful. Myths told of their feuds and adventures, often teaching lessons about human nature itself. Stories like Prometheus stealing fire, Perseus slaying Medusa, or Theseus battling the Minotaur were not just entertainment. They reflected the hopes, fears, and values of the Greek people. Religion was woven into every part of Greek life. Temples and shrines dotted the land, from the Grand Parthenon in Athens to sacred sites like Delphi, where the oracle of Apollo gave cryptic prophecies to kings and generals. The Greeks also honored their gods through festivals and competitions, the most famous being the Olympic Games, first held in 776 BC. Every 4 years, athletes from across Greece gathered at Olympia, not just to compete, but to honor Zeus. Mythology and religion gave the Greeks a shared identity, linking hundreds of scattered city-states under the same cultural fabric. Though divided politically, they were united by their gods, their stories, and their belief that the divine touched every part of human life. The Persian Wars. In the early 5th century BC, Greece faced one of the greatest threats in its history, the mighty Persian Empire. Stretching from Egypt to India, Persia was the largest empire the world had ever seen. To them, the small, quarrelsome Greek city-states seemed weak and insignificant. But when Athens supported a rebellion against Persian rule in Ionia, the Persians struck back. What followed became legendary: the Persian Wars. The first invasion came in 490 BC, when King Darius I sent a vast army across the Aegean. The Persians landed at a plain called Marathon, just miles from Athens. Facing them were a smaller force of Athenian hoplites. Outnumbered, the Athenians used strategy and courage to their advantage. Charging across the plain in tight formation, their spears and shields broke the Persian lines. Against all odds, Athens won. The legend says a messenger ran from Marathon to Athens, about 26 miles, to announce the victory before collapsing, giving birth to the modern marathon race. But Persia was not finished. In 480 BC, King Xerxes, son of Darius, launched a massive second invasion. His army, said to number hundreds of thousands, poured into Greece, while his navy sailed along the coast. At the narrow pass of Thermopylae, a small Greek force led by King Leonidas of Sparta made a desperate stand. For 3 days, the Spartans and their allies held back the Persian tide, fighting to the last man. Though they were overwhelmed, their sacrifice became a symbol of Greek courage. Soon after, Athens itself was burned, but the Greeks did not give up. At sea, they struck back. In the Battle of Salamis, the Athenian navy lured the larger Persian fleet into narrow straits. There, the nimble Greek triremes rammed and sank their opponents. The Persians were forced to retreat, their dream of conquering Greece shattered. The final blow came in 479 BC at the Battle of Plataea, where a united Greek army defeated the remaining Persian forces. The greatest empire of the age had been humbled by the small, divided city-states of Greece. The Persian Wars proved something vital. When united, the Greeks were capable of extraordinary achievements. Victory brought new confidence, and with it, a new age of culture, philosophy, and power, a golden age. The rise of Athens and the Golden Age. After the Persian Wars, Athens emerged not just as a victorious city-state, but as the beating heart of a cultural and intellectual revolution. This period, often called the Golden Age of Athens, 5th century BC, was one of the most influential eras in world history, laying the foundations of Western civilization. Athens, under the leadership of Pericles, transformed into a hub of democracy, philosophy, art, and architecture. For the first time in recorded history, the idea of citizens directly participating in governance became a reality. While not everyone in Athens had political rights, women, slaves, and foreigners were excluded, the system was groundbreaking. Citizens could vote on laws, speak in the assembly, and hold public office. But Athens' greatness wasn't limited to politics. This was the age of Socrates, Plato, and later Aristotle, thinkers who questioned the nature of justice, knowledge, and existence itself. Their philosophies would echo for millennia, shaping how humanity thinks about ethics, politics, and the universe. Art and architecture flourished as well. The Parthenon, built atop the Acropolis, wasn't just a temple to Athena, it was a symbol of Athenian pride, ingenuity, and power. Sculptors like Phidias achieved new levels of realism, bringing marble to life with breathtaking precision. Drama also thrived, with playwrights such as Sophocles, Euripides, and Aristophanes crafting tragedies and comedies that still captivate audiences today. Athens also led the Delian League, an alliance of city-states originally formed to guard against future Persian attacks. But as Athens grew richer and more dominant, this league transformed into something more like an empire, Athens extracting wealth and resources from its allies to fund its projects and military. This period was not just the time of cultural brilliance but also of increasing tension and rivalry, especially with Sparta. While Athens celebrated democracy, innovation, and naval supremacy, Sparta remained rooted in military tradition, discipline, and oligarchic rule. This ideological and political divide would soon bring the Greek world to the brink of its bloodiest conflict, the Peloponnesian War. Sparta versus Athens, the Peloponnesian War. The dazzling golden age of Athens was destined to collide with the hardened steel of Sparta. These two Greek giants, one a naval democracy fueled by wealth and culture, the other a land-based military powerhouse defined by discipline and tradition, were bound to clash. That collision erupted in the Peloponnesian War, 431 to 404 BC, a conflict that tore the Greek world apart and ended its age of glory. The causes of the war were complex. On the surface, it was a struggle for dominance. Athens had turned the Delian League into a virtual empire, demanding tribute from its allies and punishing dissent brutally. Sparta, on the other hand, led the Peloponnesian League, a coalition of land powers wary of Athenian expansion. But beneath the political tension lay an even deeper divide, a war of ideologies. Athens represented democracy, trade, and naval innovation, while Sparta embodied oligarchy, tradition, and military austerity. When war broke out in 431 BC, the world witnessed a clash of strategies. Athens, guided by Pericles, relied on its strong navy, using the sea to supply the city while withdrawing behind its massive long walls for protection. Sparta, knowing it could not rival Athens at sea, launched devastating land invasions into Athenian territory, burning fields and villages in hopes of starving their enemy into submission. But fate struck Athens early. In 430 BC, a plague swept through the crowded city, killing tens of thousands, including Pericles himself. Leadership faltered, morale declined, and internal divisions deepened. Still, Athens fought on, raiding the Peloponnesian coast and maintaining naval dominance for decades. The war dragged on for nearly 30 years, filled with dramatic turns. Cities switched allegiances, revolts broke out, and battles raged across the Aegean. One of the most disastrous moments for Athens came with the Sicilian expedition, 415 to 413 BC, a grand gamble to expand their influence westward. Instead of victory, Athens lost nearly its entire fleet and thousands of soldiers, a catastrophe from which it would never fully recover. Sparta, initially weaker at sea, eventually found a powerful ally, Persia. With Persian gold, Sparta built a navy capable of challenging Athens directly. The decisive blow came in 405 BC at the Battle of Aegospotami, where the Spartan commander Lysander annihilated the Athenian fleet. Starved and surrounded, Athens surrendered in 404 BC. The once proud democracy was forced to tear down its long walls, disband its empire, and submit to Spartan control. Sparta now stood as the dominant power in Greece. Yet, the victory was hollow. The war had drained the Greek world of its strength, shattered its unity, and left scars that would never heal. The Peloponnesian War marked the end of the classical age, a reminder that even the brightest civilizations can fall to rivalry, hubris, and relentless conflict. And in the ruins of this war-torn world, new powers, first Thebes, and later Macedonia under Philip II and his son Alexander, would rise to reshape Greece's destiny. The rise of Macedonia and Alexander the Great. Out of the ashes of the Peloponnesian War, Greece was left weak, divided, and vulnerable. Athens was broken, Sparta's harsh rule made it deeply unpopular, and other city-states like Thebes rose briefly only to fall again. For nearly a century, Greece was trapped in a cycle of endless wars, each polis fighting to dominate the others. It seemed as if the glory of Greece had dimmed forever. But then, from the rugged northern kingdom of Macedonia, a new power emerged, one that would not only unite the Greek world but carry its culture across the known world. Macedonia had long been seen as a backwater by the civilized Greeks of the south. Its people were considered semi-barbaric, its kings little more than tribal chiefs. But all that changed with the rise of King Philip II. When Philip came to power in 359 BC, Macedonia was weak and threatened by foreign enemies. Yet, through cunning diplomacy, ruthless ambition, and brilliant military reforms, he transformed it into a superpower. Philip reorganized the Macedonian army, creating the Macedonian phalanx, a tighter, deeper formation of infantry armed with long spears called sarissas. Supported by elite cavalry and siege weapons, this army was unlike anything Greece had ever seen. Slowly but surely, Philip expanded his influence, using both war and marriage alliances to bring Greek cities under his control. The turning point came at the Battle of Chaeronea in 338 BC, where Philip and his young son, Alexander, crushed a combined Athenian and Theban army. Greece was now under Macedonian dominance. Though the city-states kept some autonomy, they were no longer free to wage endless wars. Instead, Philip dreamed of something greater, a united Greek campaign against their old enemy, the Persian Empire. But fate intervened. In 336 BC, Philip was assassinated, and the throne passed to his 20-year-old son, Alexander III of Macedon, better known as Alexander the Great. What followed was one of the most extraordinary chapters in world history. Alexander not only fulfilled his father's vision but far surpassed it. In just over a decade, he led his armies on a lightning campaign across 3 continents. From the Battle of Granicus to the decisive victory at Gaugamela, Alexander smashed the might of Persia, toppling the empire of Darius III. But Alexander was more than just a conqueror. Wherever he went, he founded cities, many named Alexandria, that became centers of Greek culture. He encouraged the blending of Greek and Eastern traditions, spreading Hellenistic culture, a fusion of Greek art, language, and ideas with the cultures of Egypt, Persia, and beyond. By the time of his death in 323 BC at just 32 years old, Alexander had created an empire stretching from Greece to Egypt, and as far east as India. Though his empire would fracture after his death, his conquests changed the world forever. The Greek language became the common tongue of trade and learning across the Mediterranean and Near East. Science and philosophy flourished, and the Hellenistic Age was born. Alexander's rise marked a turning point. Greece was no longer just a land of warring city-states. It had become the heart of a global culture, its influence stretching farther than ever before. Through Macedonia's strength and Alexander's genius, Greek civilization leapt from the Aegean into history's grand stage, and its echoes are still with us today. Greece under Roman rule. By the time of Alexander's death in 323 BC, Greece had left its mark on the world. Yet within Greece itself, the old rivalries of the city-states soon re-emerged. Athens, Sparta, Thebes, and others struggled to regain independence, but they were now only shadows of their former glory. The fractured Greek world soon became vulnerable to a rising power from the west, Rome. At first, Rome admired Greece. Roman elites studied Greek philosophy, read Greek literature, and even invited Greek tutors to educate their children. To Rome, Greece was a land of culture, wisdom, and sophistication. But admiration did not prevent conquest. Rome entered Greek affairs during the Macedonian Wars, 214 to 148 BC, where the once powerful successors of Alexander clashed with Roman legions. Step by step, Rome defeated Macedonia and its allies. The decisive moment came in 146 BC, when the Romans crushed the city of Corinth. Its men were slaughtered, its women and children sold into slavery, and its treasures carried back to Rome. That same year, Greece was formally brought under Roman control. From that point onward, Greece became part of the Roman Republic, and later the Roman Empire. Politically, it had lost its independence, but culturally, Greece conquered Rome. Roman art, architecture, religion, and even politics were heavily shaped by Greek models. The Romans built temples that looked like those on the Acropolis. They read Homer, studied Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, and adopted Greek gods, renaming them with Latin titles. Cities such as Athens, Corinth, and Delphi remained important centers of learning and culture under Rome. Wealthy Romans traveled to Greece as tourists, marveling at its ancient ruins and theaters. For centuries, Greece continued to shine, not as an empire of its own, but as the cultural heart of the Roman world. Yet there were struggles. Heavy taxation, Roman garrisons, and the loss of political freedom weighed heavily on the Greek people. Revolts occasionally broke out, but none succeeded. Still, Greek identity survived, not by military might, but through its ideas and traditions, which the Romans spread across their vast empire. In time, this fusion of Greek and Roman worlds gave birth to something entirely new: Greco-Roman civilization, the foundation upon which much of Europe, and later the Western world, would be built. Greece had lost its independence, but it had ensured its immortality. The Byzantine era, Greece and the Eastern Roman Empire. When the Roman Empire grew too vast to manage, Emperor Diocletian divided it in 285 CE into an eastern and western half. This decision would shape the fate of Greece for the next 1,000 years. While the Western Roman Empire eventually collapsed under waves of barbarian invasions, the Eastern Roman Empire, later known as the Byzantine Empire, survived, and at its heart lay Greece. The Byzantine Empire, with its capital at Constantinople, modern-day Istanbul, became the heir to both Rome and Greece. Its people spoke Greek, not Latin. Its scholars preserved Greek philosophy, science, and literature. Its religion was Christianity, but shaped by Greek language and thought. In many ways, Byzantium was less Roman than it was the continuation of Greek civilization in a Christian world. For Greece, life under Byzantium was a mixture of continuity and change. Greek cities remained important centers of learning, trade, and administration. Thessaloniki, for example, flourished as a hub of commerce and culture. Monasteries in Greece became centers of art and theology, producing dazzling icons and manuscripts that would influence the Christian world for centuries. But Greece was also a frontier. Waves of invasions swept through its lands. Goths, Slavs, Bulgars, and Normans all left their mark. Coastal cities were raided by pirates, and the countryside often suffered from warfare. Yet through it all, Greek culture endured, adapting and surviving within the Byzantine framework. The Byzantine period also reshaped Greek identity. The people no longer saw themselves as citizens of independent polis like Athens or Sparta. Instead, they were Romans in name, Christians in faith, and Greeks in language and heritage. This layered identity gave them resilience, helping them survive even as the empire faced crisis after crisis. One of the greatest blows came in 1204, when the armies of the Fourth Crusade sacked Constantinople. Greece was carved up by Latin rulers, and for decades, parts of it were controlled by Western knights. But even then, Greek culture and orthodoxy persisted, and when Byzantium recovered some of its lands, Greece once again returned to the empire. Finally, in 1453, Constantinople fell to the Ottoman Turks, marking the end of the Byzantine Empire. For Greece, this was the beginning of yet another chapter, centuries of Ottoman rule. But the Byzantine era had already left an indelible mark. It kept Greek language, Orthodox faith, and cultural traditions alive during the Middle Ages. Without Byzantium, the legacy of ancient Greece might have been lost. The Byzantine centuries ensured that Greece was not just remembered, but continuously lived, bridging the ancient world with the modern one. Greece under Ottoman rule. The fall of Constantinople in 1453 sent shockwaves through the world. For the Greeks, it marked the end of the Byzantine Empire, the last bastion of their medieval identity. From that moment forward, Greece entered a long and often harsh period under the rule of the Ottoman Empire, which would last for nearly 4 centuries. Life under the Ottomans was complex. On the one hand, the Greeks lost their political independence. The once proud cities of Athens, Sparta, and Corinth were now provinces ruled by Ottoman officials. Heavy taxes burdened the population, and many Greeks were forced into poverty. The devshirme system, where Christian boys were taken from their families, converted to Islam, and trained as elite Janissary soldiers, created deep fear and resentment. Yet, despite this domination, Greek culture did not disappear. Instead, it survived in 2 powerful ways, through faith and through language. The Greek Orthodox Church, though subordinated to the Ottomans, became the guardian of Greek identity. Monasteries and churches preserved traditions, educated young Greeks, and kept alive a sense of community. The Greek language continued to be spoken in villages, towns, and even in trade, ensuring that Greek heritage endured from generation to generation. The Ottomans, pragmatic rulers, allowed a degree of religious and cultural autonomy under the millet system, where different faith communities managed their own affairs. This gave the Greeks a fragile but vital space to preserve who they were. Over time, a wealthy class of Greek merchants emerged, trading across the Mediterranean and even rising to positions of influence within the empire. Still, oppression and hardship were never far away. Many Greeks dreamed of freedom, clinging to legends of their ancient ancestors and prophecies of liberation. Secret societies and local uprisings occasionally flared, though most were crushed swiftly. Yet the spirit of resistance smoldered quietly beneath the surface. By the late 18th and early 19th centuries, new winds of change began to stir. The Age of Enlightenment in Europe and the French Revolution inspired Greek intellectuals. They began to speak openly of independence, writing books and forming societies that rekindled national pride. Slowly, the long centuries of Ottoman rule were coming to an end. For nearly 400 years, the Greeks endured foreign domination but never surrendered their soul. Their faith, language, and shared memory of a glorious past kept them alive as a people. And when the moment finally came, those centuries of quiet endurance would erupt into one of the most heroic struggles in modern history: the Greek War of Independence. The Greek War of Independence. By the early 19th century, the Greek people had lived under Ottoman rule for nearly 4 centuries. But the spirit of independence had never fully died. Inspired by the Age of Enlightenment, the ideals of the French Revolution, and the rise of nationalist movements across Europe, the Greeks began to dream of freedom once more. The movement gained momentum through secret organizations, most notably the Philosophers, Society of Friends, founded in 1814. Its goal was simple yet daring: to overthrow Ottoman rule and establish an independent Greek state. Members spread across Greece and abroad, preparing for the uprising in secrecy. In 1821, the revolution began. The first sparks were lit in the Peloponnese, spreading quickly across central Greece and the islands. Villages rose against Ottoman garrisons, banners of independence were raised, and the cry of "Freedom or death!" echoed through the mountains and coasts. The struggle was brutal. The Ottomans responded with overwhelming force, massacring entire populations in retaliation. One of the darkest moments came in Chios, 1822, where tens of thousands of Greeks were slaughtered or enslaved, shocking Europe and stirring international sympathy for the Greek cause. At the same time, Greek revolutionaries fought courageously in battles such as Dervanakia, where they halted Ottoman advances, proving that resistance was possible. The war soon became not just a local rebellion but an international cause. Across Europe, intellectuals, artists, and politicians rallied in support of Greek independence, seeing it as the rebirth of the ancient land of philosophy, democracy, and art. Figures like the English poet Lord Byron even traveled to Greece to fight and raise funds for the revolution, giving their lives to the cause. Yet the struggle was far from easy. Divisions among Greek leaders often weakened the movement, and Ottoman power, bolstered by Egyptian forces under Muhammad Ali Pasha, threatened to crush the revolution completely. By the mid-1820s, the Greek cause seemed almost lost. Then, in a dramatic turn, the major European powers, Britain, France, and Russia, intervened. Motivated by both sympathy and strategic interests, they sent their fleets to support the Greeks. In 1827, the decisive Battle of Navarino saw the combined European navies destroy the Ottoman-Egyptian fleet, shifting the war in Greece's favor. Finally, after years of sacrifice, bloodshed, and international diplomacy, the dream became reality. In 1830, the Treaty of London officially recognized Greece as an independent nation. The land of Homer, Plato, and Alexander was free once again. The victory was not just political but deeply symbolic. It proved that a people could endure centuries of oppression and still reclaim their identity. The Greek War of Independence was the rebirth of a nation, linking modern Greece to the glory of its ancient past, and inspiring nationalist movements across Europe and beyond. the birth of modern Greece and its early struggles. With the recognition of independence in 1830, Greece was reborn as a modern nation-state. But freedom was only the beginning of a new struggle. The land had been devastated by years of war, its population reduced, its economy shattered. Now, the Greeks had to rebuild. At first, Greece was small, covering only the Peloponnese, parts of central Greece, and a few islands. Millions of Greeks still lived under Ottoman rule in places like Crete, Thessaly, Epirus, and Macedonia. The dream of a greater Greece, uniting all Greek-speaking people, became the guiding vision of its politics. But internal challenges loomed. The new state needed stability, and Europe's powers, who had helped Greece win its freedom, insisted that it be ruled by a monarch. Thus, in 1832, the young Bavarian Prince Otto was installed as the first king of Greece. His reign was marked by efforts to modernize the nation, but also by tensions between foreign influence and Greek self-rule. Throughout the 19th century, Greece slowly expanded its borders through wars, diplomacy, and uprisings. Territories like the Ionian Islands, Thessaly, and later Macedonia and Crete were gradually brought into the Greek state. Yet each victory came with hardship: wars against the Ottomans, conflicts with neighbors, and internal political rivalries. By the early 20th century, Greece stood transformed, no longer a scattered collection of villages under Ottoman rule, but a modern nation finding its place in the world. Its people had endured centuries of conquest and division, yet their identity, shaped by ancient heritage, Byzantine faith, and centuries of resilience, remained unbroken. Greece had risen once again. Greece's enduring legacy. From the mysterious palaces of the Minoans to the thunder of Spartan spears. From the brilliance of Athens' philosophers to the conquests of Alexander. From Byzantine splendor to Ottoman oppression, and finally to independence, the history of Greece is a story of survival, transformation, and eternal influence. Greece has never been the largest empire, nor the wealthiest nation. Yet its impact on the world is immeasurable. Democracy, philosophy, theater, mathematics, art, architecture, and faith, these are the gifts Greece gave to humanity. Today, when we debate in parliaments, cheer at the Olympics, or read the words of Plato and Homer, we are living echoes of Greece's long history. The Greek people endured invasions, slavery, and centuries of foreign rule, yet never lost their identity. Their story is proof that a civilization can bend but not break, fall but rise again. This is not just the history of a nation. It is the history of an idea, the idea that culture, knowledge, and freedom can outlast empires, and that even a small land of rocky mountains and scattered islands can change the course of the world. This is the entire history of Greece, a legacy that will never fade.